Do we plan our life challenges before birth? Why is my life as it is? Why do I suffer? Have I lived before? Our guest today has found some answers to these questions. The veil of forgetfulness is lifting. Listen. Hi, I'm Mel Van Dusen. Welcome. Today we're going to talk about this book, Courageous Souls. Do we plan our life challenges before birth? And here to tell us about this wonderful book that he's written is Robert Schwartz. So, Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. Robert, your life was changed because of this book, and you wrote that you felt your life was not a unique expression of your soul. Can you tell us why you felt that way and how this book began to change your life?
Mel, I started writing Courageous Souls in mid-2003. At that time, I was living in Chicago, Illinois, and I was working as a self-employed marketing and communications consultant. And I was profoundly unfulfilled by the work that I was doing. You know, I often felt that if I were to fall off the face of the earth, my clients wouldn't even notice that I was gone. They would just plug somebody else into my role and carry right along. And I knew that there had to be a higher calling or some kind of higher purpose to my life, but I didn't know what it was. And so in my attempt to figure that out, I went to see a psychic medium, which was something I had never done before. In this session with the medium, she introduced me to the concept of spirit guides, and that is highly evolved, non-physical consciousnesses who help us plan our lives and then who guide us through them. And through her, I was able to speak with mine. One of the things they said to me was, they said, "You planned your greatest challenges before you were born." And I said, "Why in the world did I do that?" And they said, "You did this for purposes of spiritual growth." So we went on and we talked a little bit about what some of my challenges had been and why I had planned them. And in the days and weeks after that session, I kept thinking about this information, and it helped me to go back and reframe many of the seemingly bad things that had happened in my life. And I realized I was onto a concept that could be very healing for people, that could help people to see deeper meaning in their challenges, and so I decided to write a book about it.
And these mediums? These mediums triggered what you call an awakening in you and a remembering.
By remembering, I'm referring to a remembrance of myself as an eternal soul. I think that at this point in time, with the collective consciousness being what it is, we tend as human beings to define ourselves as the body, as the personality, and in many cases as the limitations and faults that we believe our personalities have. But this is not who we really are. It may be who we are temporarily in this lifetime, but we are divine, holy, eternal beings who have always lived and who will always live. And so this session with the medium helped me to shift my self-identity from one of limitation, personality, body, to thinking of myself as an eternal soul.
And how did that feel to you?
It felt a little bit frightening because it was a big change in identity, but it also felt very empowering because I came to understand that I'm the creator of my life. I'm the creator of everything I experience. And I planned many of my greatest challenges for purposes of my own growth. So instead of feeling victimized by them, which is how I felt when they occurred, now I came into a place of greater respect for myself because I knew that I had bravely taken on those challenges to foster my own growth.
You say that it takes great courage to live the plans you made before you were born.
The term Courageous Souls, the title of the book, is really not a reference to the soul. It's a reference to you and me, the personality that's in the body. And the reason for this is that when our souls plan our lives, they're not in a state of fear. So if you're not experiencing fear, you really don't have an opportunity to be courageous. But when we're here, when we're personalities incarnate in a human body, we very frequently experience fear. And so to follow through on the plans made by our souls, this is really what takes the courage. So it's you and me and everyone listening today, we are the courageous souls.
Right. And I think you're an example of a courageous soul for talking about things that would have seemed foreign to you before you embarked on this endeavor.
This was a big change in career and lifestyle for me. I was coming from the corporate world. People weren't talking about this. Perhaps some of them were thinking about it, but no one was talking about these things. And my family and friends really don't, for the most part, they don't share my interest in this subject matter. So for me to come forward with this kind of information and make the kind of lifestyle change that I made, it did take some courage on my part, and I respect myself for that.
Now, when people hear about pre-birth planning, I imagine many people would wince. And so to set up the stage for this concept, as it were, give us an idea where this planning takes place. What kind of a mental environment? Describe this to us.
The planning is conducted by our souls, which are in both the non-physical realm and in the physical realm. In the physical realm, they're here as us. Personality is a portion of a soul's energy temporarily in a human body. But the soul is vast. It goes beyond one personality, and it's operating on many dimensions all at the same time. Now, when the pre-birth planning is conducted, it's conducted in particular rooms, in particular buildings. These are not physical buildings. They're not physical rooms. They're etheric. They're non-physical. They're created by consensual thought. In the non-physical realm that we come from, thought is literally creative, and it manifests instantly. So the planning takes place by consensual thought. In other words, all the souls agree we will plan in a place that looks like this, that looks like a room in a building, and so that room and that building come into existence because of the thought.
Why would a soul want to plan their life?
Souls plan lives for several reasons, and in particular they plan life challenges for several specific reasons. One is to balance karma. And to take a simple example, if in a past life two people had a relationship in which one was physically ill and the other was that person's caretaker, when they transition back into spirit and review the lifetime, there will be a sense of unbalanced energy, and they will be motivated to balance it. So the easiest, the most simple and direct way to balance that kind of an experience would be simply to switch roles. So now the one who was physically ill plans to be the caretaker. The one who was the caretaker plans the experience of physical illness. What makes it so interesting and so challenging is that once these two souls are in body, neither will remember the pre-birth plan. So the challenge becomes one of expressing love unconditionally, both giving it and receiving it under the most difficult of circumstances while in body.
You also say that these stories are meant to be felt. Read these stories with your heart. These feelings can't be comprehended by the mind. Mind is a barrier.
I think the human brain was designed to be useful in very specific ways, very specific applications, third-dimensional applications, like setting up a camera to film an interview, or driving a car, or balancing a checkbook. The logical mind is very good at third-dimensional tasks like that. But higher truths, higher forms of wisdom are accessed through the heart. They're understood through the heart. Feelings are really the language of the soul. That's how souls communicate with each other. And so when people are trying to understand pre-birth planning, I ask them, consider it with your heart, see how it feels to you. Now, if it doesn't feel right, then they can and should discard this idea. But if they feel intuitively that there's truth to it, that there's something to it that could be helpful to them, then I say embrace it with your heart and apply it to your life.
In your book, you say that we choose our parents, we choose when we'll be born, we choose where, and we choose our relationships. How finely and minutely are these choices made?
The planning the soul does is vast and extremely detailed. One of the stories in Courageous Souls is a gentleman, Bob Feinstein, who planned the experience of blindness. Now, when we went into his pre-birth planning session, we actually heard the conversation in which he was planning where he would live during short intervals of his life, 6-month intervals, which schools he would go to, who his teachers would be, who his peers would be. He chose, of course, his parents and his time and location of birth. So the planning that the souls do goes down to the most minute level.
You talk about how physical illness can stimulate healing, and you cite an incident, I think his name was John, where he actually planned to come down with AIDS.
You're referring to John Elmore, who did in fact plan before he was born to have the AIDS virus. Now, why would John do this? Well, John had a number of previous incarnations in which people had said shaming words to him. And in those incarnations, John believed the shaming words. He allowed other people to define him, and he took the shame in and internalized it. When he passed out of those lifetimes and had his life review, he saw that this was his reaction, and he said, okay, I can do better than this. I want to plan an incarnation in which I have the same challenge, people shaming me, But this time I want to get it right. I want to rise above the shaming words, redefine myself as a holy, eternal soul, and realize that I am not what other people are saying about me. So he formed pre-birth agreements with his future parents, his peers at school, future teachers, and future lovers to say shaming things to him. We went in with the medium into his pre-birth planning session and actually heard him asking people to say shaming words to him. And the reason he chose the AIDS virus is because it's perhaps the most shame-based illness in our society today. So he knew that this would engender the judgments and the scorn and the criticism that he wanted to rise above. It's really a very ingenious life plan.
Right. Now, some of the people who are listening to this might think, this sounds absolutely sadomasochistic. I mean, why would people in a soul group, as you referred to it, agree to shame each other in a lifetime, and then when they return to the afterlife state, they remember the agreements they've made, and growth somehow comes of this? I think this concept might perplex some people.
It's a very difficult concept to understand intellectually, and again, this is why I encourage people to take it into their hearts and try to understand it through feeling. But to answer your question, it's very important to understand it from the perspective of the soul. A lifetime is very, very brief. It's no more than a clap of thunder. And yet the wisdom that comes out of it becomes part of the soul for literally all eternity. So in John's case, as he comes into a remembrance of himself as a holy, eternal soul, from the soul's perspective, this results in a more profound self-knowing, a greater self-awareness of oneself as love, as the energy of love. The suffering that John endures by being shamed by people, from the soul's perspective, is very, very brief, very transitory. But that wisdom, that more profound self-knowing, the soul has that now for all eternity.
Why plan these incidents? Why plan anything? What's the point? What's the purpose?
Well, one of the reasons we discussed a moment ago, and that is to balance karma, but there are several others that are very important. One is healing, and an example of that is a woman, Penelope, who's in the chapter in Courageous Souls on deafness and blindness. Penelope planned before she was born to be born completely deaf. Now, why did she do this? In her lifetime, immediately prior to this one, Penelope had the same mother she has in this lifetime. In that lifetime, she heard her mother shot to death by the mother's boyfriend. She didn't actually see the murder, but she was within hearing range, and she heard the gunshots that killed her mother. As you can imagine, she was quite traumatized by that, and in fact, it led her to commit suicide in that lifetime. So she carried this energy of trauma with her, and when she was reviewing her life and talking with her spirit guide, she decided she wanted to have a lifetime in which she would heal that trauma. Spirit guide said to her, and we heard this word for word in the planning session, he said, "My dear, would you like to be born deaf so that no similar trauma happens to you again?" And she said, "Yes, that is what I want and what I wish to do." So she came into this lifetime to heal the trauma from the past life and make sure that it didn't happen again.
You talk about self-induced amnesia, being another state of consciousness being behind the veil. Why do we forget this planning? How does that work?
The phrase behind the veil refers to the border, the dimension between the physical and the non-physical realm. It's not actually a physical divider, it's just a phrase that's used to express the idea you're articulating, that we forget who we are and where we come from. Two main reasons why we do that. One is that if we had full recollection of all of our past lives, and people have lived trillions of past lives, some of them are so traumatic that the memory of them would be too much for us to bear, and we wouldn't be able to focus on what we're doing in this lifetime and why we came here. Another reason for self-induced amnesia is that the realm we come from, the non-physical realm, really is a realm of tremendous love and joy and peace and harmony. And if we remembered what it was like, we would be so homesick, for lack of a better term, that we would be focused on that realm, not focused on what we came here to do, and it would undermine the entire incarnation.
Right. The physical realm, I understand from your book, is one of duality, up and down, hot and cold, good and bad. It's a world of contrasts. Sorrow of duality allows for a better understanding of joy. Hatred deepens our understanding of joy. Can you talk about this world of contrasts and how it is so different from a world that is not of contrasts?
You asked a moment ago why we plan incarnations and life challenges. The main reason, in addition to the couple I've cited already, is to experience contrast. And what I mean is this. I believe, and my research shows, that souls are made literally from the energy of love. Souls are the energy of love. So in the non-physical realm, which is a realm of love, we as souls experience no contrast to ourselves. And because we experience no contrast to ourselves, we can't fully know or understand or appreciate who we are as love. So we come here to this realm of duality because here we experience great contrast to love. And that contrast leads us into a more profound self-knowing. In other words, if we can choose to express love unconditionally, again, both giving and receiving it, under the most difficult of circumstances, we start to remember that that's who we are. We remember that we are love. And from the soul's perspective, that process of remembering results in a more profound self-knowing. That's really what an incarnation is all about.
Okay. You say that the soul contains all personalities from all incarnations. That seems like a lot to deal with. How do you explain that?
The souls will incarnate trillions of times. But it's important to understand that the soul is not limited. The soul is vast and operating on many, many dimensions simultaneously, and all of the lives are actually lived concurrently. You know, here in the third dimension we have physical space and we have linear time, but these things are illusions. They're constructs and they're teaching tools. Our souls are not experiencing physical space or linear time. So it's almost as though the soul is standing in the center of a circle with all of the incarnations surrounding it, and it can choose to attend to different ones, but they're all happening at the same time. Very similar in some ways to an old vinyl record, which has, say, 8 songs on one side. You can only play one song at one time, but that doesn't mean the other songs don't exist while that song is playing. They're all still there. It's just which one are you attending to at that moment.
You know, as I hear you talk about these things, it occurs to me that this understanding you have is relatively recent. Now, if we were to go back 6 years, could you have imagined yourself talking in this way 6 years ago?
6 years ago, I had no idea that I was going to be doing this kind of work. It's the result of my own personal spiritual awakening. But I've explored my own pre-birth planning with the mediums, and I've learned that I planned before I was born to write this book and the other books that are going to follow. And let me add, I don't believe that simply because some medium said it to me. I know in my heart, in my intuition, that this is my life plan, my calling. I feel that very, very strongly.
You said that Earth is the favorite school building for people who are making these plans. That suggests that people can incarnate in other places or plan these things in other places, and those other places must be radically different from this?
The soul can incarnate in any location, in any time. So we all have many different physical lifetimes here on Earth and also on other physical planets. We also have many non-physical lifetimes. The sorts of incarnations that a soul has are so vast, they almost defy human comprehension. But again, all of it is for the purpose of experience, growth, and learning.
And I suppose one of the criticisms of a book such as this is that people will say, look, you know, if you posit that there's something like karma, and perhaps you go to India and see a pauper in the streets, the pauper might feel that he's incapable of changing his life situation because this is his karma. It's a fatalistic worldview. How would you respond to that?
It's really not fatalistic in the sense that we as personalities always have free will, which means that we can deviate or adhere to the pre-birth plan as much as we want or as little as we want. Now, having said that, certain experiences are so important to us that they're planned as very, very high probabilities, and we can try to dodge them. But it's not in our best interest to do that, because then we don't attain the learning and the growth that we're looking for. The other thing that will happen in that case is that our spirit guides will actually be working to bring those experiences to us. So really, it's better to surrender to the flow of life and look at things as learning opportunities rather than adopting a victimization mindset or seeing them as tragedies.
I have a question. How is the scenario set up in this book, pre-life planning? How did that come to be? I mean, how is this possible? How was this situation set up so that it works as it does?
I think what happened is that originally, as I understand it, the physical plane was created for souls to enjoy a physical experience, because previously souls had only had non-physical experiences. And as I understand it, souls started placing portions of their energy in human bodies, and those people, those personalities, had direct perceptions of the non-physical realms. Now, what happened over time is that the ego started to develop. People started to make increasingly selfish, fear-based decisions. Those decisions caused a lowering of frequency, a lowering of vibration progressively over time, until eventually the direct perception of the non-physical realms was blocked. People no longer had it. And then they truly forgot, that they were eternal souls. I think what we're doing in these times of spiritual awakening, is that we're returning to that perception of ourselves as divine and holy beings. Something we knew before by direct perception, lost it, and now we're coming back to it.
The world is becoming more high-tech, more scientifically oriented. It seems to me, many people are accepting the scientific method as a religion, science as a religion, and therefore anything that isn't physically based, anything that isn't perceived through the experience, through the senses, or learned through the senses, is fictitious. So, what do you have to say about that?
I'm going to answer that by referring to a book other than my own. In A Course in Miracles, there's a wonderful line that says, "To sense is not to know." And I really believe that. I believe that the physical realm is one of illusion. And by illusion, I mean something that's not eternal. It's something that's temporary, because we wanted this experience for our learning and growth. But what we're perceiving with our five senses really is not reality. It's not our non-physical home. And you know, in my conversations with non-physical beings for courageous souls, they frequently refer to these times in history as, quote, the passing age of reason. And I think that that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to become increasingly aware that reason, logic, the physical brain is extremely limited, and that only by going into our hearts can we sense the higher truths, the higher wisdom.
In having interviewed these people, do you see an end result of all this pre-birth planning? Is there a state that also all souls aim to arrive at? And if so, what is that state?
I think what the souls are doing again is coming into a more profound self-knowing of themselves as love. And this is what we are being challenged to do on the physical plane. In circumstances in which we're tempted to respond in less than loving ways, we're being asked to come into a remembrance of who we really are as souls. And I think that that's the power that an awareness of pre-birth planning has. You know, so often when something seemingly bad happens to us, we don't see any deeper purpose to it. We feel victimized. We go into anger, guilt, blame. If we can shift away from those things and understand that we plan these challenges for our own learning and growth, or to heal, or to balance karma, or to serve others the way Christina serves people as a gifted healer. When we understand that we plan these things, then we can release the anger, the guilt, the blame, the feelings of victimization, express love more freely, accept love more freely, and then we can really recall that this is who we are as eternal souls.
And going back to this beginning quote from your book, you might focus on why you might have planned a particular challenge in your life, not on whether you did. So even if you can't, remember planning something, or you can't see the value of it, if you can see how you might have planned a particular challenge, even that can reorient your response to it, I would think.
That's right. The crucial question is not whether or not it was planned. It's, if I planned this, why might I have done that? Because when you ask that question, you tap into the same wisdom that you would tap into if you knew that it was planned and if you knew why.
After talking in the tea garden at Green Gulch Zen Temple in Marin, Robert gave a talk at East West Books in Mountain View, and afterward he answered some questions.
Yes.
Where does consciousness come from?
Where does consciousness come from? Originally, you're asking maybe where God comes from.
Stan Groff says that there's absolutely no scientific evidence that consciousness originates in the brain, and that the brain is like a TV set, and that consciousness actually originates somewhere else. So if that's true, what is the somewhere else that consciousness comes from?
I think the somewhere else that consciousness comes from is the soul. And the soul is infused with the energy of God. Everything, literally, is infused with the energy of God. That's where the phrase all that is comes from. God is all that is.
So you would define God as?
All that is. And that's not my terminology either. There are angels and other channeled beings in the book who refer to God as all that is. Okay.
How do we in this dimension, in our consciousness, know for sure that what comes through a channel is absolutely the truth? Because that's the assumption that's being made.
The question is, how do we know if what comes through a channel is absolutely the truth? I don't know that you can know that it's absolutely the truth. I would be the first to tell you that my research is not employing the scientific method. I don't think it really can. And I don't think that that's really the point either. I didn't want to write a dissertation about pre-birth planning. In fact, I can't do that because, as far as I know, I can't travel to the pre-birth planning sessions and report back to you on what I saw. But what I'm trying to do is offer people what was offered to me, and that is a different way of looking at things that allows them to see deeper meaning in their challenges. Now, the question about mediums and channels and accuracy is a good one. There are a couple ways in which I try to double check that. One is that I had multiple personal sessions with each one of them. I can tell you that they knew things about me that they could not have known without true psychic gifts. Another way that I checked on this was by talking to the interviewees after the sessions. And in every case, they always said that the medium or the channel knew things about them that were accurate and that they couldn't have known unless they had true psychic gifts. But it is important to understand, and any medium or channel will tell you this, that their mind acts as a filter. So the information that's coming through is only as good as the medium or channel's ability to minimize the effects of the filter. And that's what I was looking for when I chose people to work with. I wanted people who understood that and who had done the self-work necessary to reduce the effects of their own filtering. And I think I found them. Yes?
What's your conclusions for your own life and your own state of consciousness, 2003 till now?
That's an excellent question. The conclusions for my own life. I know that the energetic impact of my work is much more profound if I live what I'm saying. It's one thing for me to sit up here and say, believe in pre-birth planning and forgive everyone because you planned your experiences with them. But if I don't do that myself in my own life, then on an energetic level, there's a disconnect between my words and my energy. So if I really want to be of service to you, then I have to do what I'm saying, and I'm being called to do it right now.
Tough road to hoe.
It's a tough road, yeah. Questions? Well, then thank you all for coming.